The night was cold, silent, and heavy with the scent of rain when a faint cry broke through the darkness. It wasn't the cry of a child, nor the howl of an animal. It was something deeper, a sound born of pain, fear, and desperation. By the side of a lonely river, far from any home or light, a young woman stumbled through the mud, clutching her swollen belly with trembling hands. Her name was Mira, though no one in that valley knew her. Her face was pale, streaked with tears and raindrops. Her breath shallow as thunder rolled above the mountains. Each step she took felt heavier than the last. Her strength was fading, her eyes wide with a mix of terror and hope. She had been walking since morning, barefoot, her clothes torn and soaked. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to keep moving. The man who once promised her love and safety had left her the moment he learned she was with child. For months she tried to survive, begging for food, hiding from the cruel eyes of strangers. But when the pains began earlier that evening, she realized she could no longer run. The nearest village was miles away, and there was no one to hear her cries. The river beside her roared as if echoing her suffering. She leaned against a rock, clutching her belly, whispering prayers to a sky that refused to answer. "Please, not now. Not here," she begged, but her body no longer listened. The contractions grew sharper, slicing through her like fire. She screamed, the sound swallowed by the storm. Her knees buckled and she fell onto the wet ground, rain splashing against her face. The cold wind bit into her skin as she gasped, her heart pounding. She looked up, the clouds swirling above her like a dark ocean, and for a moment she thought she saw a flicker of light, but it vanished just as quickly. The river seemed to hum softly, almost as if it was whispering to her, urging her to fight. She gritted her teeth and pushed, her cries blending with thunder. Hours passed in a blur of agony and rain until finally the silence was broken by the faintest sound, a baby's cry. Mira's trembling hands reached down, lifting a tiny life into the world. But before she could even catch her breath, another wave of pain hit her. She realized with disbelief there was another one. Tears streamed down her face as she fought through the agony, her body nearly broken. And then another cry, softer, weaker, but there. She stared at the two tiny faces, barely visible through the rain, and a broken smile spread across her lips. "My babies," she whispered weakly. Her voice was shaking, but her eyes held warmth, the love of a mother who had nothing left to give, yet gave everything anyway. She tore a piece of cloth from her dress and wrapped it around them, holding them close to her chest. Her body was trembling, her lips turning blue, but she didn't let go. "You'll live," she whispered. "You'll live even if I don't." Her vision blurred as exhaustion took over. The rain slowed and dawn began to creep over the horizon, turning the sky a faint gray. Her hands loosened, her breath shallow, her heart slowing. She looked at the twins one last time, one crying softly, the other quiet and still. "Please," she murmured to the empty world, "let someone find them." And with that final breath, her eyes closed, her body still beneath the rising sun. The river flowed gently beside her, carrying the echoes of her final prayer. For hours the world remained silent, broken only by the faint sound of two newborn cries. The storm had passed, and the air now carried the scent of wet earth and sorrow. As morning grew brighter, a figure appeared in the distance, a fisherman making his way to the riverbank, his old boat creaking behind him. He was used to silence, used to the calm of early mornings, but that day something felt different. He stopped mid-step, his ears catching a faint whimper carried by the wind. At first he thought it was an animal, but then he heard it again, softer, more human. He followed the sound, his heart pounding, and when he reached the edge of the tall grass, he froze. There, lying in the mud, was the body of a young woman. Her face was pale, peaceful, as if sleeping. But beside her, wrapped in a torn piece of cloth, were two tiny babies, one moving weakly, the other barely breathing. The old fisherman dropped to his knees, his weathered hands trembling. "Dear God," he whispered. He had seen storms take lives before, but never something like this. He lifted the cloth gently, seeing the newborn struggling against the cold. One tiny hand reached out, grasping his finger, and something inside him broke. He looked at the woman's still face, at the lifeless eyes that had once held hope, and tears filled his own. "You fought so hard," he murmured, "but you're gone now. And they're all that's left." The wind brushed softly over the river, carrying her final prayer into the distance. The fisherman looked around. No footprints, no sign of anyone else. Just him, the twins, and the silent witness of the flowing water. The fisherman knelt there for a long moment, frozen by what he saw. The twins were shivering, their tiny breaths fogging in the cold air, their faint cries breaking through the stillness like whispers of life refusing to die. He took off his old shawl, wrapping them gently, and lifted them close to his chest to share his warmth. The woman's body lay still beside the river, her hand resting near the cloth as though, even in death, she was trying to shield her children. The fisherman's heart ached as he whispered softly, "Don't worry, I'll take care of them." He didn't know who she was or where she came from, but something in her face reminded him of his own daughter, lost to fever years ago. The pain of that memory returned now, twisting inside his chest. He reached out and closed the woman's eyes, murmuring a small prayer before turning toward the narrow path that led back to his small hut. The journey was slow, the mud thick and heavy, the air damp and cold, but he kept walking, clutching the babies close. Every few steps, one of them would let out a soft cry, and he would whisper, "Shh, it's all right, little ones. You're safe now." When he reached his hut, his wife, an old woman named Lila, gasped as she saw him soaked from head to toe, holding 2 small bundles in his arms. "What happened?" she cried, rushing forward. He laid the twins carefully on their old wooden table, their faces pale but alive. "I found them, by the river," he said, his voice heavy. "Their mother, she's gone." Lila's eyes filled with tears as she covered her mouth in shock. "Poor soul," she whispered, looking down at the babies. "They're so small." She quickly lit a fire, warming water, and brought out the last bit of milk they had. They were poor, barely surviving on fish and rice. But in that moment, nothing else mattered. Together they cleaned the babies, wrapped them in dry cloth, and fed them drop by drop from an old spoon. The twins quieted, their little hands curling in sleep. The fisherman watched them closely, and something stirred deep inside him, a feeling he hadn't known in years. The warmth of life in his cold home, the fragile sound of soft breathing. It reminded him that even in loss, hope could return in the smallest form. Lila looked at her husband and said softly, "We can't just leave them. They have no one." He nodded slowly. "Then they're ours now," he said, voice trembling. "Maybe God sent them to us." From that day, the fisherman and his wife became parents again. They named the twins Arav and Asha, Hope and Light. The names felt right, like promises whispered by fate itself. As days turned into weeks, the twins grew stronger. Their cries filled the tiny hut, bringing laughter where silence once lived. But though the couple loved them deeply, the shadow of their beginning still haunted them. Sometimes at night, the fisherman would sit by the river, staring into the water, remembering the young woman's still face. He had buried her near the banks, placing wildflowers on her grave. "You gave everything," he would whisper. "I'll make sure your children live a full life." Years passed. The twins grew into bright, curious children, running barefoot by the river, chasing dragonflies and throwing stones into the water. They didn't know the truth yet, that their real mother had died bringing them into the world. But the fisherman and Lila always felt her presence nearby, as if she watched over them. The little family lived in peace, though their lives were simple and their possessions few. But life, as it always does, began to change again. The village nearby was growing, and strangers began passing through the area, merchants, traders, and sometimes cruel men with greedy eyes. One evening, as the sun dipped low, the fisherman returned from the river with a worried face. "There are new people near the banks," he told Lila. "They're building something, maybe a road." "If they dig near her grave." He trailed off, unable to finish. Lila touched his arm gently. "Then we'll move her," she said softly. "We can't let them disturb her rest." That night, after the twins had fallen asleep, the fisherman went back to the spot where he had buried the woman. The moon was full, silver light washing over the quiet river. He stood there silently, remembering the day he found her, the sound of her final prayer echoing in his heart. But as he began to dig gently, something strange caught his eye, a small pendant half buried near her resting place. It shimmered faintly in the moonlight. He picked it up, brushing off the dirt. It was an old locket, worn but beautiful, shaped like a tear. Inside, under the cracked glass, was a small picture, a young man and woman smiling, arms around each other. The fisherman frowned, his heart beating faster. Could this be the twins' father? He looked closer and noticed a symbol carved on the back. A family crest, the kind only wealthy people had. He whispered to himself, she wasn't just anyone. She came from somewhere. He looked toward his hut, where the twins slept peacefully, unaware of the mystery surrounding their birth. For years, he had told himself it didn't matter, that love was enough. But now, holding the locket, he realized their story wasn't finished. Somewhere out there someone might be searching or hiding, and if that someone found out, what would happen to the children he now called his own? The thought sent a shiver through him. He slipped the locket into his pocket and looked once more at the river, its dark waters flowing quietly under the moon. I'll protect them, he whispered, no matter what. The fisherman couldn't sleep that night. The image of the locket burned in his mind. The smiling couple, the symbol carved into the metal, the faint engraving of a name he couldn't fully read. He sat beside the fire long after the flames had dimmed, staring into the embers as though they might whisper the truth. When Lila woke before dawn, she found him still sitting there, eyes heavy but restless. You haven't slept, she said softly. He shook his head. There's something about that woman. Something I need to understand. Lila placed a hand on his shoulder. Maybe some things are better left unknown, she said. We have the children now. That's what matters. He nodded, though his heart disagreed. He knew secrets had a way of surfacing, and when they did, they could tear lives apart. For a few weeks he tried to forget. Life returned to its rhythm. Arav and Asha grew fast, their laughter filling every corner of their small hut. Arav was curious and bold, always asking questions about the world beyond the hills. Asha was gentle, often found sitting by the river, humming softly to herself, her reflection rippling in the water. The fisherman loved watching them, two little souls who had brought light back into his life. But one afternoon while fishing downstream, he noticed something unusual. A group of riders had stopped near the old tree by the river, the same place where he'd first found the woman. They were dressed in fine clothes, their horses restless, and one of them held a piece of parchment, glancing around as though searching for something. The fisherman's heart began to race. He crouched behind a rock, listening carefully. It must be around here, one of the men said. The Lord said she disappeared near the river. Another replied, We've been searching for years. You really think she's still alive? If she is, she'll be punished for what she did. Their voices carried over the water, hard and cruel. The fisherman stayed hidden until they left, his mind spinning. Could they be talking about the woman he buried? What had she done? And who was this Lord they mentioned? He felt the locket in his pocket and gripped it tightly. When he returned home, Lila saw the fear in his eyes. What happened? She asked. He told her everything. The men, their words, the name they spoke with hatred. Lila's face paled. We must keep the children safe, she whispered. If they find out. Her voice broke. They both knew what it could mean. That night, they hid the locket beneath a loose floorboard and swore never to mention it again. But secrets, like rivers, always find their way to the surface. As months passed, the twins grew older, now nearly 6, full of life and wonder. They often asked questions about where they came from, and though the fisherman tried to avoid the truth, he could see in their eyes the same curiosity he once had. One evening, as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold, Arav came running up the hill, holding something in his small hand. Baba, look what I found! He shouted. The fisherman smiled, expecting a stone or shell, but when he saw what it was, his heart stopped. Arav held the same pendant he had hidden months ago. It was under the floor, the boy said innocently. It's pretty. Is it Mama's? The fisherman froze, words caught in his throat. Lila rushed over, quickly taking it from the boy. Yes, she said gently. It belonged to someone we knew. Now go wash your hands for supper. Arav nodded and ran off, but the old man felt a chill. They had hidden the truth to protect the children, but fate had a strange way of bringing it back. Later that night, after the twins slept, the fisherman looked at the pendant again. His mind returned to the riders, their fine clothes, their anger, their search. He knew if they ever discovered the twins, they might take them away. Or worse. We have to leave this place, he told Lila quietly. She stared at him. Leave? But this is our home. If those men return, they'll find her grave. They'll see the children. I can't let that happen. Lila hesitated, tears filling her eyes. They were old, tired, and the river had been their life. But she knew he was right. The next morning, before dawn, they packed what little they had, a few clothes, a small pot, a fishing net. The fisherman carried the twins on his cart as they began the long walk toward the eastern hills. The air was cold, mist rising from the ground. The children didn't understand why they were leaving, but the fisherman told them they were going somewhere safer. After days of walking, they reached a small village surrounded by fields of wheat and tall trees. The people there were kind, and no one asked questions. They built a small hut near the edge of the woods, where the river curved gently past. For a while, life felt peaceful again. The twins played under the trees, their laughter echoing through the valley. The fisherman fished in the river, while Lila tended a small garden. It almost felt like fate had given them another chance. But one evening, as they were preparing dinner, a shadow appeared at the doorway. A traveler stood there, his cloak wet from rain, his eyes sharp and searching. "Forgive me," he said politely. "I'm looking for a family, a man and woman who might have come from the Western Valley." The fisherman froze. "We're just simple folks," he said. "We came here months ago." The traveler nodded slowly, glancing at the twins playing by the fire. His gaze lingered for a moment, then he smiled faintly. "Beautiful children," he said softly. "They remind me of someone I once knew." And before the fisherman could reply, the man turned and walked away into the rain. That night, the old man lay awake, staring at the roof. The traveler's eyes haunted him, not cruel like the rider's, but knowing. He couldn't shake the feeling that the past was drawing closer once again. And this time, no river could carry it away. The rain poured through the night, tapping softly against the roof like an endless whisper. The fisherman couldn't sleep. He sat beside the dim fire, his mind replaying every word the traveler had spoken. "They remind me of someone I once knew." It was a simple sentence, but there was weight in his voice, the kind that comes from old memories or guilt. When dawn broke, the traveler was gone, leaving no trace but muddy footprints leading toward the main road. Yet the unease he brought lingered heavy and cold. Over breakfast, Lila noticed the lines on her husband's face growing deeper. "You think he knew?" she asked quietly, glancing toward the twins who were laughing outside, unaware of the storm brewing over their heads. "I don't know," the fisherman said, but he looked at them like he saw ghosts. Lila reached for his hand. "We can't run forever. Maybe the truth will find them one day. Maybe it should." He looked at her, his tired eyes filled with love and fear. "The truth doesn't always bring peace, Lila. Sometimes it destroys it." They said no more. Days passed, and the traveler did not return. Life resumed its quiet rhythm, but the fisherman's heart stayed restless. One afternoon, while Arav and Asha were playing by the edge of the woods, they stumbled upon a small leather bag lying half-hidden beneath a tree. Arav, ever curious, picked it up and opened it. Inside was a folded parchment, sealed with a wax crest. "What's this?" he asked, showing it to his sister. Asha looked closer. "Maybe it belongs to that man who came." They ran back home, shouting for their parents. The fisherman froze when he saw the crest, the same mark engraved on the locket. His heart pounded as he broke the seal and unfolded the parchment. It was a letter. The handwriting was neat, elegant, written by someone educated, powerful. He read the first line aloud softly. "To whoever finds this, I am searching for my wife, Mira." His breath caught. Lila's hand went to her mouth. "She left our home 6 years ago. I have reason to believe she fled toward the Western Valley, carrying my children. I was a fool. I let pride and anger blind me. When I realized what I had done, it was too late. If anyone has seen her, or the children, I beg you, tell me. I will make things right." The fisherman's voice broke as he read the last line. Signed, Lord Karan of Danpur. For a moment, the small hut fell silent, only the wind whistling through the cracks. Lila whispered, "So she was running from him. But why?" The fisherman shook his head. Maybe she was afraid. Maybe he wanted the children for his name, not for love. He looked at Arav and Asha, who stood watching with wide eyes, sensing the weight of what was unfolding. "Who is Mira?" Asha asked softly. The old man hesitated, his throat tight. "She was someone brave, someone who gave you life." The words hung heavy in the air. Lila reached for the children, pulling them close. "You don't need to understand everything now," she said. "What matters is that you're safe and you are loved." But deep inside, they both knew the truth could no longer be buried. That night, the fisherman sat alone outside, staring into the forest. The moon hung low, silver light glinting off the wet leaves. He thought of the woman's face, the one he'd buried near the river, and now he knew her name. Mira, a mother who had fled across valleys, carrying life inside her, only to die alone in the storm. He clenched the letter in his hand. Should he send word to this Lord Karen? The man claimed regret, but regret came too late. Would he take the twins away, call them his heirs, and erase the life they knew? Or would he look at them the way the fisherman did, with love, not obligation? He didn't know. When morning came, he made his decision. He burned the letter in the fire, watching the flames curl the paper into ash. Her peace won't be stolen, he whispered. Not again. But fate had already set its course. A few days later, as the children were fetching water from the stream, Arav noticed a figure on horseback at the edge of the road. The rider was the traveler, the same man who had come before. He dismounted slowly, his eyes soft as he approached. You two, he said kindly. Where are your parents? Arav hesitated. At home, why? The traveler smiled faintly. You remind me of someone dear. Tell your father that his secret isn't safe forever. Before the boy could reply, the man turned and rode away. Arav and Asha returned home frightened, and when they told the fisherman what happened, he felt a chill crawl down his spine. The walls were closing in. That night he and Lila packed again. Not much, just enough to leave before dawn. But when the first light touched the horizon, the sound of hooves echoed down the road. Soldiers, dozens of them. The fisherman grabbed the twins, his heart thundering. Go out the back, he whispered. Lila clutched his hand. We can't outrun them. The door burst open. The traveler stood there, but this time his cloak bore the crest from the locket. Behind him, soldiers waited silently. Please, the traveler said, stepping forward. Don't run. I mean no harm. The fisherman's voice shook. Who are you? The man removed his hood. His face was tired, lined with years of guilt. My name is Arjun. I serve Lord Karan. And those children? They're his blood. The room fell still. The twins stared at him, confusion clouding their eyes. Lila's lips trembled. He won't take them, she whispered. Arjun looked at her gently. He doesn't want to take them. He wants to see them, to make peace with their mother's memory. He's been searching for years. He never forgave himself for what he did. The fisherman's chest rose and fell, torn between anger and compassion. And what if I say no? Arjun's eyes softened. Then I walk away. But someday they'll ask who they are. Don't they deserve to know? His words hung in the silence. Outside, the soldiers waited, their armor glinting in the light, but none moved forward. Arjun bowed his head. He only asks for truth, not forgiveness. Then he turned and left, the sound of hooves fading into the distance. The old man stood there long after they were gone, staring at the door. The truth had come knocking, but for now, he had chosen silence. Years passed, and time, as it always does, began to blur the edges of memory. Arav and Asha grew tall and strong, their laughter echoing through the hills where they played as children. The fisherman's beard turned white, and his hands trembled when he worked the nets. But his heart still beat for the family fate had given him. The twins were now nearly 16, curious, kind, and different in ways even they couldn't explain. Arav had a mind sharper than most, always asking questions, reading every scrap of paper he could find. Asha, on the other hand, had a gentle soul. She often dreamt of a woman's face, soft eyes, a quiet smile, standing by a river under the rain. She would wake up with tears on her cheeks, though she didn't know why. The fisherman and Lila never spoke of that night by the river again. The pendant remained hidden, the past buried beneath years of love and silence. But destiny doesn't forget. One morning, a traveling merchant came to the village, selling books, fabrics, and trinkets. Arav wandered through the stalls, his eyes catching on something glinting in the sunlight, a silver emblem carved into the corner of a chest. He frowned. He had seen that symbol before. It was the same one engraved on the pendant he'd once found as a boy. The merchant noticed his stare. Ah, young man, you recognize it? Arav nodded slowly. Where is it from? The merchant smiled. It belongs to the royal family of Dhanpur, the crest of Lord Karan. You must have seen it on coins or old flags. Arav's stomach tightened. The name struck something deep within him, familiar, though he didn't know why. That night he told Asha what he'd learned. Her face went pale. Danpur, I've heard that name in my dreams, she whispered. A voice calling out. A woman crying by a river, Ara frowned. We need to ask Baba. When they brought it up, the fisherman froze. His hand slipped from the table, his eyes wide with fear. Where did you hear that name? Arav exchanged a glance with his sister. From a merchant, why? Who is Lord Karan? The old man looked at them, at the children he had raised as his own, and the weight of the years pressed heavy on his chest. He wanted to lie, to protect them, but his heart could no longer carry the truth. He rose slowly, walked to the old trunk in the corner and lifted the loose floorboard. When he turned back, the locket glinted in his trembling hands. This belonged to your mother, he said softly. Her name was Mira. The twins fell silent, eyes locked on the pendant. Asha stepped forward, her voice breaking. Our mother. She's gone, isn't she? The fisherman nodded slowly. She gave everything for you, her last breath, her last prayer. I found you beside her by the river. Asha covered her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. Arav's fists clenched, his voice shaking. Why didn't you tell us? The old man's eyes glistened. Because I wanted you to live free from the pain of the past. Because love was enough. But Arav's heart burned with confusion. And our father? Who was he? The fisherman hesitated. A man who once loved her, but lost her through pride. He sent someone searching for her long ago. I thought staying silent would protect you. Now I'm not sure. Asha took the locket, opening it carefully. Inside, beneath the cracked glass, was the image of a young man and woman, their mother, smiling, and beside her, a man whose eyes looked hauntingly familiar. Arav stared at it, realizing those eyes mirrored his own. He's alive? He asked. Your father? The fisherman nodded slowly. Yes, Lord Karan of Danpur. He never stopped searching. The air felt heavy. The truth that had been buried for years now stood between them, unyielding and raw. That night, neither of the twins could sleep. Asha lay awake, staring at the stars through the small window. Do you think he's still looking for us? She whispered. Arav sighed. I don't know. But if he is, maybe it's time we found him first. Asha turned toward him, fear in her eyes. What if he doesn't want us? Arav shook his head. He will. He has to. At dawn, before the fisherman woke, they packed a small bag and set out toward the east, toward Danpur. The road was long and rough, winding through hills and forests, but their hearts were determined. They had to know who they were, where they came from, and why their mother had died alone by the river. Back at the hut, when the fisherman realized they were gone, he felt his heart shatter. They've gone to find him, he whispered. Lila gripped his arm. Then maybe this is how it was meant to be. For days, the twins traveled on foot, asking travelers and villagers for directions. Some had heard of Danpur, a grand estate beyond the mountains ruled by a man known for his wealth and sorrow. They say his wife disappeared long ago, one old woman told them, and he's never smiled since. The twins exchanged a look, their hearts pounding with hope and fear. When they finally reached the city, they stood before towering gates, guarded by men in polished armor. Arav stepped forward. We're here to see Lord Karan, he said firmly. The guard looked them over. And who are you? Asha swallowed hard. His children. The words hung in the air like thunder. The guard frowned, ready to laugh, but then stopped, staring at their faces. Their eyes, the same piercing gaze as the Lord himself. He hesitated, then motioned them to wait. Moments later, another man approached, older, familiar. It was Arjun, the traveler who had once visited their home. His eyes widened in disbelief. You came, he whispered. You actually came, Arav's voice shook. We need to know the truth. Arjun's face softened with sorrow. Then come with me. He led them through the grand gates, across marble courtyards and echoing halls. Every corner told a story of wealth, but also of loneliness. And at the far end, sitting by the window, was a man in fine clothes, his eyes lost in the distance, a man who looked like them. Arjun's voice trembled. My lord, they're here. The man by the window turned slowly, his eyes tired yet sharp, the weight of years etched deep into his face. Lord Karan had lived half his life waiting for a ghost, for a woman he once loved, and for the children he never held. When his gaze met theirs, the room fell silent. He studied their faces, the boy's determined stare, the girl's trembling hands, and in that instant, something inside him broke. He rose to his feet, his voice barely a whisper. Who are you? Arav stepped forward, holding out the locket with shaking hands. We think we are your children. Karen froze. His breath caught as he took the pendant, his fingers tracing the familiar carving. When he opened it and saw Mira's face inside, the color drained from his cheeks. His knees gave way, and he sank into the chair behind him. Mira, he whispered. His eyes filled with tears as he looked back up at them. Where did you find this? Asha's voice cracked. Beside the river, where she died. The words hit him like thunder. For a long moment there was only silence, the kind that breaks hearts and bends time. Karan bowed his head, tears spilling freely. I searched for her, he whispered. Every river, every road. But I was too late. He reached out, hands trembling, afraid they'd vanish if he touched them. But when his fingers brushed Asha's cheek, he felt warmth, real and alive. His voice broke. You're mine. You're really mine. Arav's throat tightened. Why did you leave her? Karan's eyes filled with regret. I never meant to. We were supposed to marry. But my family, they forced me to leave. They said she wasn't worthy of our name. I tried to fight, but by the time I returned, she was gone. No one knew where. Asha began to sob softly. She died giving us life. Karen covered his face, his body shaking. And I lived all these years not knowing I had you. The room felt heavy with both love and loss. The reunion they had all dreamed of, but too late for the one who had started it all. After what felt like forever, Karen rose and pulled them into his arms. For the first time in years, he felt whole. The twins wept into his chest, feeling the heartbeat of a father they had never known. You're home now, he whispered. You'll never be alone again. Word spread through the estate. The Lord had found his long-lost children. Servants gathered quietly at the door, watching with tears in their eyes. That evening, Karan lit candles by the window, facing the setting sun. For Mira, he murmured, for the love that never died. Asha placed a flower beside the flame, whispering softly, Thank you, Mama, for giving us life. Days later, Karan insisted on visiting the river. He wanted to see where it all began, where fate had stolen her from him, and where their children had first opened their eyes. Together, they traveled back, accompanied by Arjun and the fisherman who had raised the twins. When Karan saw him, he stepped forward and clasped his hands. You saved them. You gave them a life I could not. I owe you everything. The old man's eyes filled with tears. They saved me too, my lord. I only did what a father should. Karen embraced him like a brother. By the riverside, under the same sky that once raged with storm, they stood in silence. The air was calm now, the water gentle, as if the river itself had finally found peace. Asha knelt and placed the pendant on the ground. Arav whispered, We're home now, Mother. You don't have to wait anymore. The wind picked up softly, carrying their words across the water. For a brief moment, Asha thought she saw a shimmer. A faint light, like the outline of a woman smiling through the mist. Her heart felt warm, as if her mother's spirit had finally rested. That night they returned to Danpur together, not as strangers bound by blood, but as a family stitched by destiny. Karan announced that the fisherman and his wife would live with them for the rest of their days, honored as family. Without them I'd have nothing, he said. Under the same roof, laughter returned to halls once silent. Arav began studying with scholars, determined to one day lead with compassion, not pride. Asha spent her days helping the poor in the villages nearby, saying, No mother should ever be alone like ours was. And every year, on the same day, they returned to the river, laying flowers, lighting candles, and thanking the woman who had given her life so they could live theirs. Sometimes, in the gentle sound of the water, they swore they could hear her voice, soft, loving, eternal. Life, as cruel as it had been, had finally come full circle. The pain had led them home. The love that began by the river had found its way back through time. And in that truth there was peace. The story of Mira, the mother who died alone, would live on, not as a tragedy, but as a reminder that love never truly ends. It flows like a river, finding its way through even the darkest paths until it returns to where it began. And sometimes miracles don't come from the heavens. They come from the hearts of those who keep believing. If you ever lose hope, remember, somewhere, someone is still waiting for you to find your way home. True love may lose its way, but destiny always brings it home. Never stop believing that even in pain something beautiful is waiting to be born.